Morning, everyone, and a really warm welcome to our session today. My name is Professor Gemma Stacey. I'm Director of Academy at the Florence Nightingale Foundation. And just very briefly tell you a little bit about the foundation. We're an organisation, a charity that exists to elevate the voice of the nursing and midwifery professions. We do this mainly through developing leaders at all levels of our professional hierarchy, from nursing associates, students and early career, right the way to our executive nurse leaders working in government and national positions. We also support nurses and midwives to develop their ability to create and use research as a method of enhancing their practice and influencing practice. And finally, we work to influence policy for the benefit of the professions as well. And really excited to join my absolute, one of the most favourite people that I have the opportunity to work with, Joanne Bosanquet. And Joanne, an introduction from you.
Thanks, Gemma. So yeah, good morning, everybody. Hello, my name is Joanne Bosanquet. I'm the Chief Executive at the Foundation of Nursing Studies. I've been in post about 3 years now, and it's just wonderful to be able to work in the charity sector. We work really closely with the Florence Nightingale Foundation for lots of reasons, but you'll know why more in a little while. But our work is really collaborative at FONS. We are person-centred. We work with people's values. We work with where people are. We don't do to, we do with. And we look at the potential of everybody that we work with. And so one of our main aims is about collaborative and collective leadership, inclusivity, making sure that people feel part of every process, including the evaluation of all the programmes that we run and facilitate. And then one of the main issues around our longer programmes is that we help nurses and their teams to develop shared values, which is just so important for workplace culture. So yes, very, very important that we create safe, critical work environments and in a way that's creative and positive. So we align really, really well with the work of FNF. So welcome everybody and good morning.
Thanks, Jo. So Jo and I were given a bit of a flexible approach to how we wanted to run today's session, and we felt that the best way that we could share the issues that we've been hearing from the professions around their wellbeing and support and development, particularly in that period of transition from student to early career nurse, was through a conversation. So think about this as your opportunity to hear how Jo and I are making sense of what we're hearing from the profession. And I think, Jo, you're starting off with the first question.
Yes, I will, Gemma. And just before we start, I'm really, really pleased to see so many practice development nurses and clinical educators on this programme this week. It's really, really crucial that we connect with you and that we listen to you. So thank you so much for that. So Gemma, thinking about the last kind of 2-3 years and all the work that you've done prior to coming into FNF, engaging with early career nurses, what have been their concerns to you that they've raised with you?
It's been a really interesting period, I think, for there's been a long-standing acceptance that that transition from being a student to a newly registered nurse is extremely challenging. We're grappling with that sense of accountability, responsibility, the realities of the working world and balancing that alongside what life throws at us as well. And so there feels like during that time, there's a real shift in identity. We start to really understand ourselves and our contribution to the world in a different way. And we can't underestimate the significance of that transition period. But what's been interesting for me, and it's not just been from the early career nurses themselves, the whole profession have shared with us in the various different forums that we've supported, that there is a sense that the current circumstances that early career nurses are transitioning in are harder than ever before for many, many reasons, but obviously the pandemic a significant part of that. We actually partnered with Unison and the Nursing Times to do a survey around preceptorship experiences for early career nurses, and that was responded to by 5,000 people, registered nurses, at all, again, different stages of their career. And I think what was most interesting for me was that the established workforce were expressing their concern about the challenges they were having in supporting their junior colleagues and what the implications of that was going to be for those junior colleagues longer term. So this is not just about the early career nurses sharing their concerns. The whole workforce is recognising that this is a really challenging time that we all need to be aware of. But for the early career nurses themselves, they were talking to us about that sense of sink or swim, feeling dropped in the deep end, the fact that their preceptorship programmes had been understandably completely disrupted as a result of the pandemic, and that they'd been left feeling really quite lost, unsupported, not seen in terms of the support needs that they had. For some of them, this was leading to more significant consequences, their mental health, their physical health affected by it. And we actually ran a follow-up focus group, and some were already telling stories about needing to take time off sick, sharing experiences that would indicate longer term concerns like post-traumatic stress disorder, and some considering leaving the profession as early as 6 months in. So there are really significant concerns. But I think what I found incredibly interesting from that particular group was that there were members that acknowledged that the times had been so incredibly challenging and the demands had been huge, but where they had had that consistent support, you know, one or two people that had checked in with them, that had maintained them as somebody that they really prioritised in terms of understanding how the shift had impacted on them, recognising that an event for them would have been the first time, and taking some time to debrief with them. They really felt a sense of belonging in those environments. And in many ways, for those individuals, despite the fact it had been so challenging, it had really cemented their professional commitment and their longer term kind of belief that they were in the right place. So what that told me was, out of all of the challenges that we've experienced, yes, some of our more structured and formalized support strategies have had to be compromised, but where we can still pay attention to our early career workforce in very simple ways, that can pay dividends. And for those individuals, it really had made such a significant difference to them to really feel seen and valued. And for you, Jo, you've had a few programmes throughout this period that have been focused around students and early career nurses. What for you do you think we can do to support them at this time? What's the most important thing we can do in terms of their support and development?
Thanks, Gemma. And I'm just some reflections on what you were just saying there, kind of positively reframing that at the end of just in that conversation that we've just had is an example of reflection, isn't it? It's an example of reflective practice that even though we've all been through, varying levels of trauma in the last 2 to 3 years, that having that opportunity to reflect together, to positively reframe and to see ourselves in a bigger picture, is very, very important. And that's what we were doing, really. I didn't realise this at the time, but for the ones of you that don't know, Gemma gifted the resilience-based clinical supervision programme to FONS after her PhD. We worked with Gemma during that time to develop some resources which are all freely available on our website. And so we took a chance quite early on. I remember getting hold of Health Education England and saying, we've got to do something. We've got to do something with this right now, and we've got to do it online, and we've just got to give it a go. And they were fantastic, and we were commissioned to deliberate to facilitate a resilience-based clinical supervision programme online with learning disability and mental health student nurses, kind of who were all over the country. They didn't know each other, they hadn't met each other before, and they were all either, some of them were at work, but a lot of them weren't for various reasons, and they were feeling really isolated and quite lonely. And so we kind of picked them up in a way. I'm not saying that we rescued them at all, but we enabled them to to feel valued, and so we facilitated the programme. It's a form of clinical supervision. It focuses on the emotional regulatory systems, and it looks, it really helps them to look at who they are as a person and what their emotional responses are to situations. It could be at work, it could be at home, it could be a bit of both. And they were amazing. They all came online, and they were so chuffed to bits, actually, that somebody cared about them in that way, and allowed them some space to reflect. And to be honest with you, I think we had one of them that had ever experienced clinical supervision, reflective supervision before. The rest of them had never experienced it, and it was not in their curricula. So their clinical supervision was one-on-one, with your practice assessment document, with their assessors at work. It was not with peers who, where they felt a sense of belonging themselves. And what was fantastic was that it didn't take them long at all to form as a collective. And so after that, they stayed together. Many of them carried on, and some of the mindfulness exercises that we practiced with them, I suppose, in a safe space, and the check-ins that we use in order to form as a team at the beginning of a meeting or the beginning of a shift or at the end of the shift, checking in, checking out. All of this is available on our website in the booklets. That was unbelievably powerful, and it's not complicated. You just need to do it. And since then, we've had one or two that want to come back to FONS to be an associate facilitator. And it's been the most phenomenal journey for us. We evaluated it from start to finish. They were part of the evaluation, which is on our website. I've put the link in my bio for this conference today. They said I would have left. I was leaving. I was on my way out. I didn't feel as if I did belong. I felt isolated. I thought I'd made the wrong decision. But actually, as far as I know, none of them have left. They've all completed, and they're now registering this year, which is just beautiful to see. And they keep in touch. We see, Gemma and I know a couple of them. We see them regularly. We've welcomed them into our world, and they absolutely love it. And I think for us, it was about providing them with a safe space and enabling them to understand how you create a safe space virtually. Because really, this has got legs, and it worked. It was safe. Safeguarding was our responsibility the whole time, but it works, Gemma, and it could be rolled out. And once we facilitate the champion and cascade model, then they take it on themselves and they continue. So it's beautiful, and I thank you for it. I can't thank you enough for it.
It's such a joy, isn't it, to see something that I think was really driven by the sense of what is important to people in terms of their support and development in that transition. And that wasn't necessarily about reassessing competencies that people had already been assessed in their practice as students. It wasn't for them about learning more and more skills. It was actually about the safe space to be able to explore that real significant transition in identity and all of those professional, ethical dilemmas and issues that arise during that period of transition. I think we can't underestimate how many of us, and probably every single one of us on this event today, can remember those moments where we were thinking, my goodness, the accountability sits with me now. I feel that sense of huge responsibility to make the right decision, or I'm having challenges with another colleague and that relationship is really impacting on my well-being. How do I navigate that? How do I understand it? All of those things are part of our working world, and the clinical supervision format just gives that safety, that psychological safety, to speak openly and explore those. And I've got a real sense that this is something that preempts the progression into more serious psychological problems that then may need additional support, for example, psychological therapies and counselling. If we can provide the space in the moment, in the time that this is happening, for people to really process and understand those things, rather than putting them in a bit of a box. I was saying, that happened to me yesterday. Now I've got to move on. I've got to put my armour on, get back on. I can't really connect with those emotions. I've just got to keep going. If we keep doing that, then ultimately this is why we see that compassion fatigue and burnout.
I agree, from our perspective as well, it's being able to see as a reflexive practitioner, it's seeing yourself in that bigger picture and allowing conversations in a safe space to support one another, to say, look, this is temporary, we can get through this, it doesn't have to define us, because that can be overwhelming for people to feel that the whole world is on their shoulders and they are accountable and responsible for everything, because it's absolutely not true. And the empathy bit is really important. We kind of see all these words getting bandied about now, don't we? Which is dangerous, because we've got to go back and really understand what they are: moral injury, moral distress, compassion fatigue, lack of empathy, all of that. We've got to really understand what they mean, because they are being researched, and there's a lot of research coming out now, nurse-led research within the pandemic, to look at that globally. So it's very, very important that we take time to really look at the philosophy of nursing and what contemporary nursing is, as we go into the next phase of it, really, and the importance of organisational culture, because organisational culture trumps any strategy. And also the importance of being able to have those critical conversations with one another, and being able to perhaps rehearse some difficult conversations that need to be had, and supporting one another through that, instead of, again, as you say, Gemma, putting it in a box and trying to forget about it, because it's really difficult to approach certain people. But all of that, we address all of that, don't we, within the supervision facilitation. So it is. Honestly, the more we do it, the more I realise just your PhD was, for me, one of the most important PhDs that we've had for some time. So if we move on, I could go on forever, as you know, Gemma, and I really can talk about this all day. So I'm going to ask you a question about management tools. So some people do see clinical supervision as a management tool, or another task that's got to be tick box that they've got no time for. So what would you say to those who perhaps don't quite understand it the way that we'd like them to?
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a literature review that was published by the chairs of all of the forums at the RCN, and I will ask the team if they can share the link to that. It's an open access publication in the Journal of Advanced Nursing, and that paper talks about the barriers to the barriers of clinical supervision. And what that argues is that our perception as a profession towards clinical supervision is primarily suspicious and skeptical of the motives behind it. So whereas other professional groups, particularly counsellors, therapists, would see clinical supervision as totally essential to their ethical professional practice, they wouldn't see themselves as capable of practicing without access to clinical supervision. Unfortunately, nurses have not had always the most positive experience, so they can see it as a way of monitoring practice. So the word supervision implies I'm being watched to a certain degree. It can be sometimes mixed up with performance management, or even sort of management of resource, going through caseloads and deciding who you can discharge. Those kinds of things have all been experiences that people have had of clinical supervision. So we've got some work to do really, and it's not about calling it something else. It's about helping the profession to reframe clinical supervision in the way that the other professional groups do, as totally integral to their practice as a safety critical, accountable practitioner. So this is absolutely about a safe space to explore the emotional impact of our work, but it's also a safe space to explore the complexity, the dilemmas, the professional accountability and issues, and to learn as well from each other. So when we start to describe it in that way, people who say, actually, this is a very expensive intervention, it's resource intensive, it's not sustainable, it starts to make you think, well, actually, how can we not do this? And the outcomes that we're seeing, the programme that Joanne and the team at FONS ran, showed us direct links between the provision of clinical supervision and those students' ability and intention to stay on their programme. So as soon as we start to associate this with potential attrition from the profession, sickness from the profession, again, the economic arguments for this are invalid. This investment in people saves significant amounts of resource in other areas. So for me, I think it starts to become not about why we should do this. The evidence base is there. It's ensuring that it's done in a way that the profession feels a real sense of its value and can also see the value of prioritising the time. And we were really excited. The team at FONS and F&F and other experts in clinical supervision all came together to start to try and really influence this perception of clinical supervision. We've generated loads of great case studies that have been published in the Nursing Times. There's a clinical supervision zone now on the Nursing Times for those of you that want to find out some more information. And we also influenced the NMC to write out to all of the approved providers of pre-registration education to say, absolutely, clinical supervision should be an integral part. They linked it to competencies, which then means we can use this as practice hours, and basically said it is the responsibility of the universities and practice partners to make sure that this is happening for students. And our hope at our clinical supervision subject expert group is that if we make really good quality supervision the norm for students, that will feed through the whole profession, and they'll start to ask for it, demand it, role model what good clinical supervision looks like. And we know that the Professional Nurse Advocate initiative as well is really driving that agenda forward at pace, and similar initiatives are starting to take shape in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland as well. So there is definitely, we're pushing on an open door here. There's definitely that top level commitment to this happening. What do you think, Jo, if we don't do this, what would be the danger? What would be the problems if we say, okay, this is too tough, we can't pay attention to clinical supervision in the way that we need to?
Okay, organisational culture will just keep getting worse. It doesn't matter where you work. You could be in education, you could be in an academic institution, you could be in a commissioning role, you could be working for NHSEI or HE or any of the other arm's length bodies, you could be in practice. Organisational culture will keep getting worse. Ultimately, there'll be a rise in incivility because that's all wrapped up as well. And these are serious words. I've had a long time to think about this, and I have had first-hand experience of this for the last 3 years. And it's interesting because before that I was working in policy, wasn't I? And I was at national level, and this didn't touch me, which is something about, because it didn't touch me, and it should have touched me. So we've got lots and lots of work to do to persuade our policymakers that, number one, we have to have a nurse around, a midwife around every table, but also that reflexive practice is part and parcel of our professional identity as nurses and midwives and nursing associates. And so we've got to understand what that means. And, you know, we hear, oh, nursing is a safety critical profession. Midwifery, of course, is a safety critical profession. But what does that actually mean? What do we mean when we say nursing is a safety critical profession? And until we can articulate that and look at the evidence and get that evidence in conversations, and we put a price to it, and as Gemma said, we talk about it in relation to recruitment, retention, workforce wellbeing, and patient resident safety, public safety, then you know, then we're on hiding to nothing, really. We will get more burnout. Our compassion flow will not be flowing as well. Very often we've heard this year, in the last couple of years, that our nurses and nursing students have had just about enough compassion for their work, but then they lose compassion between one another, and that's where the incivility can come in, and the microaggressions and all of that. So that's all wrapped up in our experience, certainly. We'll have lack of opportunity to learn in and from practice. We'll have less opportunity to reflect. And again, as I said, we won't be building our professional identity, because that has to be revisited all the time. The philosophy of nursing is not for academics. The philosophy of nursing is for absolutely every single one of us all the time. We are reflexive practitioners. We are. It's important that we look at that, and we have time to do that. But also, I think, you know, so clinical supervision sets a tone, doesn't it? It sets a tone and a culture within an organisation, and it should sit alongside brilliant recruitment, retention, and continuing professional development practices and policies. So every single, you know, chief nurse, across everywhere, commissioning, delivery, all of it, they should be threading person-centred practice throughout all of their strategies, their operational plans, and person-centred practice is clinical supervision in our view. So I think, you know, the CQC have got and the other UK regulators have got a very important part to play here. You know, there was one 2013 report, as Gemma and I remember looking at when we went to the NMC meeting last year. There's been one CQC report where clinical supervision was very well articulated, and there's been nothing since. So is it time to revisit that? Well, yes, I think it is. But again, if we take it up another level and look at it on a UK level, then it should be part and parcel of every single regulator's key lines of inquiry and support for providers and commissioners of care across the health and care system. So yeah, I mean, I could go on. I know I want to get time for some questions, so I will stop there. But yeah, there's lots and lots more, Gemma.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jo. And I believe we are now moving into the point where we can take some questions. So thank you for the conversation, Jo. It's, as always, an absolute joy to take what appears to be a simple intervention that we could all move forward into practice, but really get down to the why, the reason why this is so important, but also what are the barriers and how can we help people to navigate through those. So thank you, Jo, for the conversation.
Thank you, Gemma, for the conversation. I've been at RCN Congress all week in Glasgow, and this is my last day today. I'm going home today, but what a lovely end to my very, very exhausting week. So thank you, Gemma.